How wise was it to label it a kangaroo court?
I think in politics you are completely entitled to criticise political things that you disagree with and to use language accordingly.
Good to have you on. I remind you, it's less than 4 years since Mr. Johnson won that landslide majority that seemed to usher in a new world of Conservative politics. And now, if the reports are right, the party is riven in a style unseen for years. Why might that be, Sir Jacob?
Where is the Conservative Party? I think if you look at this not so much as the immediate issue around Boris, but the division in British politics over recent years, it is very much the European issue. That the division that arose over Brexit as it became goes back to the 1990s, goes back to the Maastricht Treaty, and you have had these tensions within the Conservative Party, and they have been divisive within politics and became even more so after 2016. And that's a reality of British politics, that there is a division, and you see this in voting patterns, that you see the Conservatives winning in the red wall, but coming under pressure in the blue wall. There's been a shift in electoral dynamics. There's been a shift in the whole basis of politics. And this inevitably throws up tensions as it takes place.
Yes, I mean, I asked you about the splits within the party. How much of these splits or tensions been brought about by the behaviour of the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson? As we now know, he deliberately misled the Commons, he breached confidence by leaking findings of the committee, he impugned the committee, and he was complicit in a campaign of abuse about the committee. Sir Jacob.
Well, I think that some of those points you've made are deeply tendentious, that I don't know that he organised a campaign of abuse against the committee. I'm completely unaware of that. I think there are really serious issues with the committee, particularly the position of Harriet Harman. If you look at what Lord Hoffman did for a committee of Parliament, for the Judicial Committee of the House of Lords, merely because his wife was a member of Amnesty, that committee set aside its judgment because of the appearance of partiality. That's good enough for one committee of Parliament. It should apply to another committee of Parliament. And her position as chairman, I think, fatally undermines the credibility of the committee. So I think there are issues with that. I think there are issues with some of the judgments of the report. The bizarre idea that they knew what Boris Johnson was thinking. I mean, to make this claim in a report that is meant to follow proper standards of evidence seems to me to be folly. They claim to have known what he was thinking as he went upstairs to his flat.
Why didn't he stay and fight? Why did he choose to quit on Friday and not stay and fight the by-election? Can I put it to you, because he knew he'd lose?
Well, actually, the one opinion poll done for the Times said that he would have won the by-election.
Well, let the public, let the good folk of Uxbridge decide. Why didn't he?
So the
was
by-election.
he frit?
No, the by-election is, I think, a separate question. I think what he didn't want to do was to allow opposition parties to find the basis of a majority against him. Boris was never likely to win a vote in the House of Commons because inevitably the opposition would vote against him. That's what oppositions do, and that's perfectly constitutionally proper. They're not sitting as a jury. Bear in mind, when we had impeachment, the House of Commons was the prosecutor and the House of Lords was the adjudicator. This is a sort of impeachment purely within the House of Commons, so it is a political operation. And there are enough people on the Conservative benches who have long disliked Boris Johnson who would have voted against him. So he couldn't have won a vote in the House of Commons. And there, I think it was more dignified for him to resign.
But he and the government had an opportunity to vote against Ms. Harman chairing the committee. Why didn't they?
Well, I don't, from memory, I don't think we did have an opportunity to vote against her as chairman. We had an opportunity to vote against her joining the committee, but by long-established convention, the opposition party has the right of has the right of nomination to the committee. So we don't vote against Labour nominations when they've got a Labour post. That is a very long-standing convention.
How wise was it to label it a kangaroo court?
I think in politics you are completely entitled to criticise political things that you disagree with and to use language accordingly. I don't think the Privileges Committee can claim the sort of contempt protections that you would apply to a jury trial. And if you look at the 1978 resolution of the House, it says that contempts must only be considered by the House at the most serious level that in a serious way interfere with the activities of the committee. I think calling it a kangaroo court is not interfering with the work of the committee.
But it was properly constituted, wasn't it?
Yes, but just because something's properly constituted doesn't make it right. So let's go back to the 18th century, which, as you know, I always like to do.
Indeed.
And the John Wilkes.
Some suggest you've never left.
Well, that may be a very fair point, except I wouldn't be on the radio if we were really in the 18th century.
No, yeah, go ahead.
But the John Wilkes case, Parliament expelled John Wilkes in 1769. In 1782, Parliament realised it had made a mistake, and the House of Commons expunged from the record its decision against John Wilkes. So Parliament sometimes itself acknowledges that it has made mistakes. So it's perfectly legitimate to criticise a properly constituted committee of Parliament and decisions of Parliament. If you can't criticise decisions of Parliament, all your listeners would have to think that the Dangerous Dogs Act was a brilliant and genius piece of legislation.
We saw, when Mr Johnson resigned his seat, that Nigel Adams did, and it would appear Nadine Dorries might still do that. Did it cross your mind to resign your seat, Sir Jacob?
Not for a moment, no. I'm in Somerset today. I love representing the people of North East Somerset. It is the greatest honour to represent your own community. It is a huge honour, wonderful thing to be able to do. And I hope to carry on representing North East Somerset. And God willing, I hope the voters will have another shot at returning me when the general election comes.
Is this the final act of Boris Johnson's political career?
Well, I think that the committee so disliked him that it overreacted. I think had they suspended him for 15 days, had they said they thought he was right on some things and wrong on others, but on balance there was a contempt, a more moderate report, a more judicious report, would have done Boris a lot of damage. I think this report, because it's vindictive in its 90 days, because it tries to work out what he thought, because it always tries to paint the worst colour on anything he did, has actually helped his return rather than hindered it.
In what way has it helped, Sir Jacob?
Well,
he's effectively a martyr, is that what you're saying?
It's created sympathy for him. I was speaking to a constituent yesterday who said to me that she wasn't a great Boris supporter, but she thought this report was just unfair. And I think that's an interesting view. I think that is a view that many people are taking. You've got the people who loathe Boris, whose view won't be changed. You've got the people who think Boris is a phenomenon, whose view won't be changed. But in the middle, you've got the British sense of fair play, and this report just goes too far.
How should Rishi Sunak vote as regards acceptance of this report on Monday?
Rishi Sunak will abstain on the basis that it is a parliamentary matter.
When you see that other figures such as, I'd mentioned earlier, Nigel Adams and Nadine Dorries have behaved in the way they are they guilty of sabotaging the Conservatives' opportunity, the party's chances at the next general election?
No, I don't think so. I think that both of them were looking to leave Parliament and had been for some time. And Nadine talked to me about it before Liz Truss became leader. People don't always want to stay in Parliament for a full 5 years, that family situations and other things change, and there is a mechanism for leaving Parliament.
What conversations have you had with Boris Johnson, Sir Jacob?
Well, I won't go into the details of private conversations. I'm sure you wouldn't expect me to. But I would say that Boris is as ebullient as ever.
All right, last couple of questions. Sir Bernard Jenkin has also been featured recently in the newspapers, as it would appear, although he denies it, that he attended some kind of gathering, this time for his wife during lockdown. What should happen regarding that?
But does he really deny it? I thought he said to Guido that he hadn't been to any parties, and then Guido asked about this specific party, and he hung up. So I'm not sure that this actual incident has been denied. I think this is a problem for the committee because let he who is without sin cast the first stone, and it's not a lot of good casting lots of stones if it turns out that you were in the same boat. And I think this needs to be looked into, but I wouldn't be calling for a police inquiry. I think we've had enough of that. I think it's all now a long time ago, and that it's not a great use of the police time when there are many serious issues affecting law and order, not just in London, but across the country.
Finally, it was featured on Guito Harry's podcast, Unprecedented, which is available on Global, of course, or Global, that when Mr. Sunak resigned as Chancellor last year, you celebrated that the, quotes, socialist Chancellor, close quotes, was gone. Is that correct?
That's not quite what I said, but I did refer to...
Or do elaborate. I wonder if I could ask you, Sir Jacob, to recall what you did say.
What did I say? I think I said that there was an opportunity to get rid of a tax increase that the socialist chancellor had imposed. I have been ribbed by the Prime Minister for referring to him as a socialist chancellor. I think, for the record, I've withdrawn that disobliging comment.
Enjoyed our conversation, Sir Jacob. Good to have you on the show again.